All right. So all right. So one of the interesting things that goes on in this country every presidential election year is in my lifetime we've gotten more and more and more divided as a country. We've allowed ourselves to fall into these camps of them versus them, us versus them. If you're not with me, you're against me. And so often we now even see people making personal decisions in their lives based around who should I spend time with? Should I cut this family member out? Should I cut that family member out? And the thing is, that's just kind of silly talk at some level. There was a time and a day when we could actually solve problems in this country by sitting down and having a discussion, by sitting down and saying, hey, look, here's a problem I've got, there's a problem you've got, let's find a compromise. Those days appear to kind of be gone. So much so that we now have shots fired at a political rally because somebody doesn't like the candidate. I got news for you. I don't like either of them. Doesn't mean I'm going to go out and try to shoot one of them. I don't think either of them belongs in the White House. I think one's too old and got some problems either with stress. The other one is a former game show host. In this country, we need to learn to sit across the table from each other at this point and actually learn how to solve problems together. We need to kind of stop this crap where we just go ahead and continue to kind of beat on one another to the point where if you're not going to listen, I'm just going to keep talking until you do. And now when it comes to guns and gun control, I can see the argument starting already is, oh, we need to take guns away from everybody. Good luck with that, right? In this country, good luck with that. It's not going to happen. It's just not. It is an absolute nightmare of an issue. 1 minute. Cancel. Okay. Okay, so so the point is that when we have disagreements, we need to learn to actually meet in the middle. And the less we do that, the more stuff like this is going to happen where now we've got shots being fired at one of the two candidates, which to me is just insane. We shouldn't have that kind of problem in this country. We just flat out shouldn't. We should be able to disagree with each other without having, bullets fly. It So the more I find out about what's going on, the more it looks like it really was an issue at a Trump rally where somebody decided to bring a gun, which surprises me. They actually got it in. I'm surprised security is not a little bit tighter at these things. Now, whether you agree with Trump or disagree with Trump or agree with Biden or disagree with Biden, I think we can all agree bullets flying around where there's large groups of people is a really bad idea. Now,
he's saying that the Secret Service is assessing. They have not confirmed it was actual shots or any kind.
So they're saying the Secret Service refuses to confirm it was bullets. But if you look at the video, you see President Trump being helped off stage with blood coming out of his head. That's not a good thing. So, take this for what it's worth, but I don't think we're at a point in this country where we can actually have a civil dialogue between the two parties. I think the two parties have managed to separate us enough where it's just nutty. Okay, so hey Hannibal. So what it looks like is going on is Trump was having a rally off somewhere because he's trying to announce a vice presidential candidate. He's trying to get ready for the thing this week. It looks like somebody took a shot at him. Now, agree with politics or disagree with politics in this country, we've got to at least get back to a point where we can have a civil dialogue with one another, even those we disagree with. When you see things like this take place, it's usually a sign that there is a whole lot of discontent in between the two major political parties. Now, they're not confirming it was gunfire yet. I first got a call from a friend of mine who is actively involved in politics that something was going on. He wanted to know if I knew anybody in the Secret Service, which I do, but Secret Service is not going to comment on this crap when it's ongoing. The White House hadn't even commented on it. They got Trump in his SUV like 10 minutes ago, maybe. But he had blood coming down the side of his face. And of course, Trump being Trump, he's trying to, pump his fist in the air anyway. But the thing that gets me more and more about politics, the older I get, the more it has become us against them, this side against that side. If you're not with us, you're against us. If you're not for us, you're the enemy. And we don't even allow a civil dialogue anymore. It's not, we can't sit down and say, hey, it's sort of a problem with the general society. It's more of a problem about we've allowed politicians to really separate us into two piles. We've allowed politicians to say you versus them. And one of the things I don't talk about very often is that I actually was actively involved in politics for a while with one of the two major political parties. But it was when I was in Massachusetts. To me, it was an interesting experience because I had people in that party coming to me going, hey, here's what we need you to do. It's your first election. So we need you to spend, and this was their numbers. It was really weird. We need you to spend $1 million of your own money on your campaign. And we need you to say the following things, this and this. And it was the extreme positions of that party. And then they looked at me and go, well, you're going to lose, but it'll help us get some other candidates elected. It'll help us get some other people to the top of that stack. You using your money is going to help us out greatly. And I'm like, why would I spend $1 million and intentionally lose? It doesn't make any sense to me. It certainly doesn't make any sense to go in and knowing you're going to get your butt kicked. That doesn't make any sense at all. And the positions they wanted me to take were so extreme, I didn't even agree with them. And I'm not the furthest from one end of the spectrum or the other. I'm kind of sitting in the middle. But my particular points were, hey, I want to say the following, I want to say this, and I want to say that, I want to say this other thing, and they all said, no, you can't do that. And it's gotten worse. That was probably 12 years ago. And now what's going on is we've gotten to the point where just because Trump's Trump, and he is who he is, he's a very divisive guy. Now we're bringing small caliber handguns to his rallies and taking shots at him. The bigger challenge seems to be, how do we get back to a point where we can have a civil dialogue? How do we get back to a point where we can sit down across the table from each other and say, hey, look, this is my position, that's your position. Let's find that middle ground. I'm not sure we actually have a shot to do that without having some major transition in DC. I'm not sure what that's going to take to get that done. But certainly taking pot shots at a former president who's a current candidate for the highest office in the country, that's not the right way to do it. We need, and of course, this is going to turn into a gun control argument. And what gets me is every time these things turn into a gun control argument, they don't ever have a gun expert in the room. They always have, hey, I've got an agenda. I've got to do this. I've got to, prove my point on these following things. And it's always the AR-15. It's always something else they want to take off the streets. And what I find hilarious about that is the stuff they're willing to leave on the streets is far more dangerous than the stuff they actually want to take off. So it makes no sense to me. But these things, when they happen, this is going to be instantly politicized. So one side's going to call it fake news. The other side's going to say it was staged. It's going to go back and forth and back and forth. Both sides are going to declare victory in some way. And we're going into a week when the Republicans are supposed to have their nominating convention. And what bothers me about that is not only the, agree or disagree with the candidate. I think both parties should just kind of start over with two new candidates, but that's just me. But we're also at a point where the guy that was just trying to talk is supposed to name a vice presidential candidate. He hadn't done it yet, right? And I think that was his plan. So what the hell's going on here? Nobody really knows. But to me, this is not how we solve problems in this country. We need to get back to where we can actually sit down and have a conversation and look across the table at each other and go, this is how we solve a problem. I think this, you think that. Let's gather facts. Let's sit. Let's understand the problem we're trying to solve and actually solve it. Not this artificial crap. This is going to turn into artificial crap in like 10 minutes. And I don't see another way around it. But they are saying it was small caliber pistol fire. I'm shocked they didn't hit anybody in the crowd. He's surrounded by people. So, what really happened there, it's still up in the air. But, we can't solve problems in this country by shooting at each other. That doesn't work. And what this is going to do is it's going to, so let's say for a second you're a Trump supporter. What this is going to do is rally the base. This is going to get people excited to go out and vote for him, right? This is going to rally one side. If you're on the other side, now you got to figure out if let's say for the sake of argument, this person is a far left-wing Democrat. Now the Democrats have to come out and decry this guy, right? Somebody got to come out and say something against him. It's going to turn into politics. And here's the other thing about this election that really bothers me is not only is this going to turn it even to weirder politics than it was before, can anybody actually tell me what one issue that really needs to be solved in this country? Forget, hey, survival is a democracy. Forget, hey, the country needs to continue. I understand all that. What is one primary driving issue that separates these two guys that we actually should be debating instead of how old is one and how many felonies does the other one have? That seems to be where we're focused. And now we've got gunfire going off at campaign events. It doesn't make any sense to me. I don't get where we are. Hang on one second. I'm answering some email. I'm trying to get some information. But yeah, these things are not great. Already politics is starting. So as everybody here knows, I'm active on Twitter, right? And I posted something about this on Twitter just because I can, right? So let's take a look at what people over there were saying. It's always entertaining when you see the bots start to show up. So here it is. The CIA aren't sending their best. He will prevail. I don't care who wins this election. this particular election in my head is just absolutely shot to hell anyway, because, we've got two candidates running, neither of whom should be in the Oval Office. A bunch of D&D stuff, but yeah, let's go take a look over here on Twitter and see what's popping up, right? Right, so we've got Secret Service crowding around him, Russian mustache. Trump, by the way, was actually kind of arguing whether or not he should be taken away. He didn't want to go. He wanted to stay and kind of, get as many political points out of it as he could. And what does that tell you? That he's actually not willing to just be rushed off to the hospital. Somebody's taking shots at me, even if I'm running for president. I guarantee you, you can put my ass in the limousine as fast as you want. I'm out of that area. Here's somebody already turning this into politics. Dems will incite a civil war. This is what happened. Anyway, I don't know what you're talking about there, Krispy Kremes. I didn't mod anything. So yeah, to me, it's already turning crazy. People are saying, "Oh, look, he really thinks he's Kennedy." President Trump thanks law enforcement and first responders for their quick action in this heinous act. Okay, that's nice of him. But this kind of crap is just kind of getting out of hand. I'm going to bring somebody else on. Hey, Janice.
Hey.
Thanks for joining. I don't think we have too many people watching, but I'm trying to go through the list of kind of what's going on. To me, it looks like small caliber pistol fire at the Trump rally.
Yeah, I was watching. I'm always watching this kind of thing, and yeah, it was just a normal rally, and then all of a sudden you heard the fire, and then it was like, if something just like you got hit by a bug or something on your ear, and then he was down. And I've heard rumors that they've already taken out the shooter, but I don't have any information on that yet coming from the Secret Service.
What they said was just a few minutes ago, they had surrounded somebody and escorted him out. I don't know if they took him out or what, but it looks like small caliber gunfire at close range. But what's surprising to me is they didn't hit anybody else, right? So nobody else actually got hit in the process. So because he's surrounded by people everywhere, I'm surprised there wasn't a stray bullet going someplace.
Yeah, I heard. I was watching another stream that I watch on that, and there was some talk about other people being injured, but I didn't see anybody injured at the time or anything like that. So
yeah, there's some people on Twitter now calling, "Oh, bullshit, where's the shooter? Where's the shooter?" I'm like, look, this is 20 minutes old. This is not a thing that we actually are going to have any kind of details yet, just because it's so fresh. How long that's going to take, who knows, right? This could take until tomorrow before you get details. And Secret Service being notoriously tight-lipped, they're not going to tell us anything. I've even got a couple of friends that work there that, I've had people calling me going, "Hey, can you call them?" I'm like, you know what? They ain't going to answer my call right now, right? Not a single one of them are going to take it. So,
right. They're all very busy.
I can say anything right now, and they're going to be like, whatever, dude, we don't care. Because, it is what it is. But here's this, what gets me is this is MSNBC's feed of, look, Trump doesn't want to go, right? He's like, oh, I want to stay. I want to stick around.
Yeah, he was pumping his fist, and he was saying, fight, fight, fight. And they were having trouble getting him to go into the car.
But, yeah, I mean, if I were a presidential candidate and something like this happens to me, my feet better not touch the ground between where I was in the vehicle to get me out of there, right?
Right.
I mean, it's hey, Richard, welcome on board. So hey. Richard, we got Janice on. Janice, we got Richard on. Richard,
hi, Janice.
Hey.
Richard is Canadian, but he's good people.
Oh, he's watching us go mad. Yeah, all I've seen so far, our governor has come out and saying that, first they tried to put him in jail, and now they're trying to kill him, and is just completely losing it. And then Elon Musk came out saying that he fully endorsed Donald Trump, and then I've heard from Trump's people saying that he wasn't seriously injured and that that he'll be fine.
Oh, I have no trouble believing that guy would be fine. He'd be tougher to kill than a cockroach. But to me, that's not the point. What I kind of wanted to come on and talk with some people about is that we've kind of gone past the point in this country where we see. Yeah, here's Elon Musk saying he fully endorses Trump for president right here. So there he is. Fully endorse President Trump and hope for his rapid recovery. Appears to be a crazy guy that acted alone, but we all know See, this is what gets me every time. It's been a half hour. We all know the CIA or FBI and the deep state are behind this. Blah 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 blah. Right? It's not deep state. It's some wacko with a gun. But and it is possible. Bob the Odd just pointed out that person may have just won him the election because this is going to get him a crap load of sympathy points. And now in 5 minutes, there'll be somebody on Twitter saying this is a fake from the Trump campaign so that he could win the election.
Right.
But the thing is that I kind of wanted to just sort of come on and just talk about was that you guys remember like 30, 40 years ago where Republicans and Democrats could sit down at a table and actually say, hey, look, this is the problem we're trying to solve. Let's look at some facts. Let's look at some figures and compromise.
I do remember when they were just different parties, but they weren't actively enemies of each other.
Right.
Way old enough to remember that.
Richard, you remember those days?
Well, I was talking to a friend about it the other night. When we were younger, I remember things like there's different vectors to it, but basically one side might be saying we should spend money on this, and the other side would be saying we shouldn't spend money right now. And there'd be disagreements like that. And then what it meant in the long run was maybe one's right, maybe the other's right. But there was a respectful disagreement. And I think the topics that people argue over now are much more volatile. They're not just like, do we save or spend? They're much more personal.
Yeah, they are. And what gets me is that when I was sort of involved in politics, and I said this earlier, apologize for anybody who's hearing it the second time. I thought about running for Congress when I lived in Massachusetts, but I was running as a Republican in Massachusetts, which makes you a far left-wing Democrat in Texas, which, depending on how you look at it, however you want to pitch that. But the Republican Party looked at me and said, well, we do the same thing the Democrats do. You're a first-time candidate. You've got to spend $1 million of your own money. You got to come out on the extreme position of all the party stuff. Do what we tell you to. You're going to lose. That's okay. You're going to lose, but spend $1 million. But what it'll do is it'll get our base excited so they'll come out and vote for other people. So basically, it's an illegal campaign contribution to somebody else. Unless because it's your own money, you can do whatever you want. But my point is that that's how the parties think. They don't think about convincing people anymore. They're convinced that if they just rally their base enough and make enough promises to the extreme wing of their party, they can fundraise and get some people elected. If you're not actually out to solve problems, who cares, right? So this is like 2 minutes away from turning into a gun control argument, right? I can see it now. The gun control will be on the news by the end of the day. And what gets me about that is they never bring an actual gun expert into it unless it's the NRA. They never bring a law enforcement expert into that discussion. They never bring former military into that discussion. It's always, we shouldn't outlaw anything or we should outlaw everything, and there's nothing in the middle. And what cracks me up about it every time is the first thing they want to go after is the AR-15, which, yes, I understand it was used in school shootings. It was used in Las Vegas. This is more than likely either a 22 or 38, something small that somebody can conceal easily and get it in and out of that rally. Because if you got to go through the protection systems that are at these things, you're not getting anything big in. Right? It's just not going to happen. Probably a 22 or 38. What they're going to do is go after the AR-15. They're going to go after a bunch of other stuff. And what's hilarious to me about that is that they leave the World War II surplus stuff completely alone because it's officially declared antique, which requires zero background check when you buy an antique now. And I've got a 30-06 in the other room that I bought as an antique that they didn't check they just sold it to me for $300. Like, hey, check my ID, make sure I'm a human, make sure I am who I claim I am. No background check, anything, because it's more than 100 years old. still fires a 7.62 by 54 rounds. I can hit bullseye a target at 400 yards, but because it's an antique, they leave it alone. This is about to turn into a giant gun control argument. This is also possibly going to turn the tide for Trump in the polls, which is going to make it even harder for Biden to come back from his horrible debate performance. Right. So agree or disagree with either of these candidates. And I've said before, we need to cancel this sort of nationwide paleontology project and actually look for some candidates that aren't fossils. And kind of move on from sort of, let's take these old guys and shove them into office again. This may have just thrown the election one way or the other. It may have just thrown the election. I'm not sure which way. Janice, I'll leave it to you next.
Yeah, I have no idea what this is going to do. It really does concern me, though, that the first thing that the Republicans seem to be coming out on is just trying to cause more panic and pandemonium and division in the country. I mean, normally, back in the before times, everybody would have come together because it wouldn't matter which one had been shot at. Everybody would have been upset about trying to take out a political candidate, regardless of who it was. And now they're immediately blaming the other team and trying to, get their base all, wound up. There were people calling, they were screaming at the reporters that were there, pointing at them that this was their fault and all kinds of things like that going on. And, my concern is that this is going to, set people on fire and get this to, be the beginning of something a whole lot worse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's not going to end pretty. So Richard, as a Canadian, our neighbor to the north, what do you guys think about our presidential election?
Well, I had a broad thought, which was, if you look back, like say U.S. was pre-Bush, or if you looked at a lot of Canadian politics, and a friend of mine had told me this, that one of his university professors had mentioned this to him too when we had a discussion, that a country is running along pretty smoothly when you have very high voter apathy, right? So the fewer people that feel they need to vote or something terrible is going to happen, then the more it's like, okay, your country's probably in a good spot. And in the past, let's say 10, 15 years even, anything like we're saying like this, like if you're this polarizes but also amplifies voters on both sides, and more people will come out and more people will vote. I often wonder if that's part of why both sides don't tamp down the rhetoric and make it even more vitriolic, because they know it will ignite their base. So I don't know. That's just like a broad thing that I've thought about for the past few years, because I'm like, why is it so vitriolic now as opposed to a few years ago where we would kind of debate reasonable solutions? But if you really want to get those people out to vote who aren't going to get out to vote unless they're angry, then you have to give them things to be angry about. Yeah.
Well,
I don't know. That was just a thought. I don't know how accurate that is. I'm a guy who draws goblins, by the way.
Yeah, but you draw them for Dungeons and Dragons, which is cooler than anything I've ever done for a living, right? So you've had your dog is a Magic the Gathering card, for goodness sake.
Oh, true. Yeah.
But so actually somebody's already on Twitter calling it fake, and the Trump campaign staged it. But what gets me is that in my lifetime, with one exception, in a presidential election year, I have never voted for a candidate. It's always been against somebody. And that one exception was Ross Perot. And it was like the first presidential election I was allowed to vote in because of age. But outside of that, it's always been, let's build fear. Let's say, oh, that guy's so bad, you can't vote for him. That guy's so bad, you can't vote for him. Yeah. This election, I have barely seen any discussion about actual issues in this campaign. even in the debate, it relegated into golf scores or something, right? We were arguing over who was the better golfer, and I don't care. Right. Mm-hmm. I saw somebody the other day on Twitter, like Kamala Harris was doing this thing where she was dancing with a bunch of kids. Like, how can she's not winning? I'm like, why? Because she dances well? What the hell's that got to do with anything? Where's a policy position? And what got me in the election, and this got me, and Janice, I'd love to hear your take on this because you're more of a woman than I am. But in the debate, we had two guys were arguing over women's rights. They were 28 and 30 or 31, I can't remember. But they were all well into voting age. They were both out of college before women were allowed to have a credit card in this country, which happened in 1974. It was the first time women were allowed to have a credit card. 68 or 66, I can't remember off the top of my head, was when women were allowed to sign a lease by themselves without their husband or father. Mm-hmm. Okay, these guys were out of college when both of those things happened, and these guys are up there arguing women's rights. Really? I mean, we can't find anybody like, maybe
female,
yeah, Gen X, maybe somebody who doesn't have great grandkids. I mean, just a thought that maybe we should perhaps think about looking at some younger people. And Bob the Odd points out, it's just who do you hate more, right? You're voting against somebody. You're not voting for anybody. So what's your take on the age of these guys trying to argue women's issues? I mean, that one just baffled me.
I mean, it is absurd that we have either one of these guys running for commander-in-chief, right? I mean, I grew up around the military, and you want the best and the brightest in charge. That doesn't always happen, but that's, who we want. And the idea that Harris is somehow some great example of strong women is ridiculous. I mean, right now she's one of the people who is saying she's not even sure what a woman is. Like, she won't even answer that kind of question because it's more about this, nonsense and what group is in, and it has nothing to do with women who have grown up working for all kinds of different rights. And we're here. I was born in 1970, so I've watched all of that come up, and we have plenty of brilliant women that have been a part of building our nation, and yet we just find whomever that picks, she ticks the right kind of boxes. So that's it. It doesn't matter. We could get any woman in the spot because we just needed a woman who was, this particular kind of women, and didn't really care whether or not they were in charge. There's nothing else that we do that for. You don't go, oh, well, there's this, we need firefighters, but we don't care whether or not they have any ability to do that. Or we're going to send these people to war, but we're not going to care whether or not they're actually qualified for any of the things we're doing. We're just like, oh, that's the kind of person we want, so we're just going to ship them off.
Yeah, I mean, it's already seeing it on Twitter where people are like, oh, guns aren't the problems, right? Okay. Like, really? Crazy people are going to do crazy no matter what you do. And I can tell you as a former member of the military, if you're really willing to die for a cause, you can find a way to take somebody out no matter what you do. We've learned that with suicide bombers throughout the entire Middle East, right? I mean, if you really want to take somebody out, you're willing to die, there's nothing Secret Service can do to stop you. There's just not. It ain't a gun problem. It's a people problem. And we're so divided, we can't get out of that. And Bob, I like your comment. One's a felon, the other's senile. Yeah, I don't even know if he's really senile or not, but he's definitely outside of the age bracket where he can handle a high stress job. That's absolutely, beyond a doubt. But the other thing that gets me is I've had this conversation with a couple of people. It's like, we have a country that has 400 million people in it, call it 350 million adults. These two are the best we can do. That's it. That's the best we got. So people, go ahead, Richard.
I was going to say that brings up a thought I had for years, which is, and I remember talking to friends about this years ago. where it's like, like part of what I do is game design, and making games and designing stuff like that. But I was like, there's a flaw in this game design. When we get to a point like this, there should be a part of the system that allows, like at this point, there may be a majority of both sides that agree that there should be a vote of no confidence, and the parties, it's like, we don't like your candidate, you don't like our candidate, we all agree both parties should put up new candidates. Can we agree on that? Like,
Right? None of the above. We should have none of the
Yes.
above as an option.
yes,
I'm
the old
all
South
for it.
Park episode with like the choice between a douche and a poop sandwich or whatever their joke was. You should never have that. Should never be your choice. You should have a choice to be like, we decide to opt out. We want a choice of somebody else.
People are already telling it. They're already pulling. There's already graphics showing up about the deep state with the American spy agencies being behind it. There's people calling it a Trump campaign fake. There's people. I mean, already it's starting. Right, the Secret Service hasn't even made a damn announcement yet, and it's already started. So it's election year nonsense. And the truth is, nobody knows anything yet. Maybe it's a fake, maybe it's a crazy guy, maybe it's the guy I had lunch with on Tuesday. I don't know. It could be anybody at this point because nothing's been put out.
I was saying the other night, the best, or one of the places you can at least try to narrow down the truth is to wait a month and see what retractions people have printed, because then at least that they're like, oh, this actually crossed the line, and I have to say that was not true. Read retractions that may be more truthful than the instantaneous info you get.
Yeah, I mean, but the thing that still gets me about this, and absolutely just kind of makes me sit here and watch this and go, really, are we here now? Is that people love to tell me I talk to people from all over the world because I spent a long time at a university that has people from all over the planet, right? So I know people I knew a professor who was a full tenure professor at MIT, and anytime something happened in Israel, he was from Israel, we'd have to sit him down and go, dude, you're 61. Don't go home and try to fight. I know they'll let you, but you're a 61-year-old physics professor. Stay away, right? It's not going to go well for you. So I know people all over the planet, and people tell me, he's like, oh, you're a democracy. Okay, let's look at this for a minute. We get to vote in a primary, but we get to vote amongst the candidates that the parties choose. So the parties, the insiders, have kind of chosen these two guys and put them forward. I'm not even sure what you could call what the Republicans had this time a primary, right? I know when you've got a sitting president, it's a little bit weird because that party kind of nominates him by default unless he decides to sit out of it. But if you look at the last 5 or 6 presidential elections, can you say we really got a choice with the exception of Obama, who came in and kind of took it from Hillary, because Hillary was like the shoe-in win, right? And then Obama kind of swept in and took it away. I can't remember a primary in my lifetime that wasn't pre-baked for somebody. Right. They all kind of like, oh, that's the guy that's going to win. That's the guy that's going to be the candidate. There might be 10 or 11 up there, but most of the primaries are really kind of like, we're just sort of letting them have debates so that we can kind of see what the primary guy says. And then he winds up being the candidate, and that's that. Right. So really what we get to do in this country is pick between two people that a very small number of people chose. And that's it. Is that really what we're going to call democracy? Is we get to choose between the two shitty ones that sort of party insiders can control?
Yeah, well, Biden wasn't even running when we first started doing the primary last time. And then all of a sudden, the party decided that nobody would be able to win but Trump, and then started pushing the people that were actually probably the ones that were going to win. The party started pushing them out. And so they left, and then there was nobody but Biden, and you just kind of, it's like, okay, it's this guy or it's Trump.
Yeah, so Trump, exactly. There are kingmakers. John, you just nailed it. Both parties are not. I don't know too terribly many Republicans that are actually in favor of Trump. Most of them are sitting out. I have a couple friends that have been to every nominating convention in the last 20 plus years. They're not going this year because they're just like, look, I don't want to care. Right. So Trump got pushed by the party somehow, some way, something happened to put him in that spot. And I know we're a constitutional republic. It's different, but really we don't necessarily get that much of a say. And my point is that even in the parts where we're supposed to get a say, we really don't get a say. That's just sort of PR, right? They've kind of convinced us that we do. And I get the difference between a constitutional republic and a democracy. It's not direct democracy. It's got all these jumps and hoops. But I don't think the founders, when they put together that constitutional republic, envisioned a world in which there would be two viable parties and two viable parties only, because those parties, every time you get a third party that's kind of making sense, they kind of change the rules so they don't show up on stage. Because the Libertarians had a shot for a while as sort of having a candidate show up in the real debates. And then all of a sudden they change the rules, and next thing you know, he's out, right? So, we can't have a third party coming in and screw us up, right? We have to have only two. So you're right. We get no say at the federal level. And people will say, well, what about Senate and Congress? Senate is about the only place we actually get a choice, except, again, we're choosing from the party's nominee. Congress is a whole different can of worms, because I've been in some of these meetings and talked to people who will only talk off the record. Congress has gerrymandered districts to the point where there's only about 25 of them in play, maybe 30.
Yeah.
And out of those 30, those are what keep us interested. They're like, well, we'll let those 30 go and we'll kind of sway them back and forth. But the rest of them, there are people, the only way you can take a sitting congressperson out is if you primary them from their own party from a more extreme position. That is it. That's the only way you're taking out a sitting congressman. I saw it happen in Massachusetts a couple of times, where some far left Democrat was upset in a primary by a ludicrously far left Democrat who came at him from the left, and the next thing you know, the Republican gets trounced in the election. So, if you look at the real decisions that truly matter in this country, the federal stuff, we get zero choice, really, like nothing. We get kind of told what to think.
Yeah, well, I used to take a lot of comfort in Canada because we had such lukewarm politics. It's like candidate, candidate
makes up for it.
yeah, candidate A was like, we're not going to screw things up, and candidate B was like, we're not going to screw things up even better. and that was about it. And I was like, well, I'm good with this, because from Canada, you kind of grow up. Me growing up in Canada, you always kind of watch the U.S. Like you had to me, you had a lot more entertaining TV shows, and you had a lot crazier politics. Because, like I said, Canada was kind of lukewarm. In recent years, I think all politics across the world has gotten more. Like there's a lot of things that people are wrestling with these days that we just weren't back in the day. And maybe that's a product of like after you come out of World War II, and then after you deal with the Cold War, and you're sort of like, these things go away, then there's other things that come up that, but I just, to me, it's this is history happening right now. It's interesting. Sometimes you wish you weren't in this part.
Right? There are parts of history that I've been watching that I really kind of wish, oh no. Yeah. This is not, I don't see any good way for this to go down. And we have just become, it is like reality TV. All of our politics, like our politicians used to be like the most boring people. Like I was one of, 10 people who were watching, some debate in the Senate or something like that. And it was all just the most boring stuff ever that only super nerds would care about. And everybody else would get like 2 seconds on the TV from it. And now it's just like, who can say the most crazy thing today and go viral? Like, who's going to get the most likes and clicks today? is where our politics have gone, and that is not the way. Like my first ancestor was born here in 1602. We've been doing this politics here for a long time, and the founding fathers would have been horrified. I mean, this would have been like, I don't know, George the First playing against, going against Mussolini. I mean, I don't even know.
Yep.
how we got here, other than it became more about the game and more about, who can be on the news today, as opposed to who wants to do what's right for the country.
Well, I've seen a lot of that too, where news has a bit broken down into the news used to be boring but informative,
Right.
like
That's
kind of
true.
neutral. And in recent years, it's gone more into entertainment, and also we want to get views too, so we have to be inflammatory of one way or the other. And I think that's been a detriment to actual information that people can get.
Yeah, I mean, I'm seeing people all over the different social platforms now calling it fake news, right? They're all saying, "Oh, it was staged by the Republicans." You know, Trump is weird, but I don't think he's that weird, right? I don't think he would stage something like this. Now,
Well, but the problem is now we don't even have good information sources to know.
exactly.
Like, that could be exactly what happened. That he's just like, I don't know, it might not do well, but if somebody shot me, as long as it didn't hurt too bad, it'd be fine. But we don't even know that whether or not they are that nuts to do that to get elected.
Well, who knows? But I think, and I was talking to somebody who may be listening. So if you're listening, I'm going to try to quote you, and I hope I get it right. So let's go back to the debate the other night, right? So everybody's like, well, Trump is better at debating. Trump is a better speaker. He's more mentally there. Biden has always had sort of a weird speech impediment. He does have a stutter problem that he's always worked with his entire career. He's worked through. He's now older than he used to be. He's under a lot of stress at his work, obviously, because when you're president, it does come with stress. His son could wind up in jail, so he's under a lot of personal stress, and I think he probably blames Trump for that. For his son's issues. Now, whether or not his son did, I don't want to get into it. I don't really care. But his debate performance, somebody pointed out, was that it could have just been that he was dealing with his speech impediment and trying to deal with it on live TV under a lot of stress. And one of his campaign workers may have inadvertently told him or stupidly convinced him, hey, take some medication to calm down a little bit. It's not a stutter problem, John. I'm trying to figure out the right words, but he does have some kind of weird speech that he doesn't work. He doesn't speak very well when he speaks off the cuff. Stutter's the wrong word. You're right. I'm not getting the right word, but it he had
aneurysms the first time that he ran at the end of the 80s. He had 3 brain aneurysms, and one of them had actually I'm going to say broken because, sorry, I very recently had brain surgery, so I'm going to be a little weird with my words on occasion.
Mm-hmm.
But that was why he went out of that original, the first time that he ran in the 80s when he was actually the right age for it. And so being his age and having had those mental issues, it's not even weird for him to start having this kind of rapid decline as he gets to his 80s.
It's not. And that's one of the things about this election that really kind of bothers me is that we're not allowed to say that, right? We're not allowed to say, well, because of his age, he's obviously not the man he was 20 years ago. Obviously not. I'm 52 and I'm not the person I was at 32. And I'm 52, right? And I'm in good health generally. But the point is, at his age, that's a real concern. That's a legit concern. It's a legit concern at Trump's age. Those are things that we should have front and center in front of this thing and saying, look, are these guys cognitively up to the job? Are these guys, either one of them, up to the job? I don't care about IQ points. None of that matters to me. Just cognitively, are they there? Because if Biden is really in the condition he looked like he was in during that debate, who the hell's in charge of the country right now?
Yeah, because it's not him. I don't think it's either one of them,
right?
During either of their, because Trump didn't care. And I really don't think that Biden is able. I mean, I wish, just one of the parties was having a problem and we had some even mediocre candidate, but somebody who can figure it out and, do the job. We're not even in that position.
Exactly. And with Trump, he's in the same age bracket. So tomorrow he could have a decline. His brother passed away when he was president. His brother wasn't that much older than him. So his brother went from all I can do is speak about, my experience, but like one of my parents, when they passed away, my father, who was a brilliant guy, he was a software engineer from 1962 through 2002. When he passed away, his mental decline was over years and years and years, and it was sad to watch. But towards the end, he didn't know who anybody was. He didn't know who he was for a few months, and those were real kind of problems for the family. Some families go out that way. Some families have a tendency to go out that way. Some families have a tendency to go very quickly. So when my mother passed away, she was driving herself to IHOP 3 weeks before she died. I'd rather much rather go the quick way than I would the slow way. And maybe Biden's family is just one that sort of slowly declines, and Trump's family is one that just sort of doesn't. But both of these guys are in an age bracket where that's a real concern. So really, in this ticket, we're voting for vice president, really, because vice president is kind of what's more than likely going to finish that term. And we haven't even heard anything from the vice presidential candidates. We don't even know who the hell Trump's going to have with him. So yeah, it's a real problem.
Yep.
Hang on, I got a former special operations guy trying to reach me. So hang on 1 second. I'm going to put myself on mute and you guys talk.
Yeah. Can he draw goblins though? That's the.
No, but he was a really good combat medic. So.
Oh, okay. That's a little better. Yeah. To me, I guess to the news thing and to me, a lot of that goes back to what we're talking about with the news, information. Like it's hard to get basically just clear data or information on something nowadays, which I find then makes it really hard to say, well, what do I actually think about this? Like, how do I form an opinion without data? Which I'm sure Tim knows as a scientist would be like, that's the basis of the way we try to work in modern day.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, a scientist. I'm a scientist too, so
Mm-hmm.
birds of a feather.
Much different kind of
Just
scientist.
different kind.
Completely different kind of science. She's a social scientist, and I do math.
Oh, okay. I'm an entertainment scientist.
So since you're a social scientist, what do you think this does to the poll numbers?
I don't. Given who they end up talking to most of the time, I don't think it's going to change much. Like, I don't think people that weren't going to vote for Trump are going to be more likely to vote for him because somebody tried to shoot him, or people are going to be more likely to go for Biden. I mean, I really think we're going to see these guys either a lot less, or all of a sudden they're going to be, absolutely insane. It's really hard to say because we don't have, we don't have that community. What I study in sociology right now is that building, that community building. And we don't have that. And that never works out well. Anybody who's studied any history at all knows that once you stop being neighborly, things tend to not go well for quite a while.
Well, and so that's something I've noticed. So if you go out in public now, right? So when I was a teenager and when you were a teenager, all of us here were teenagers, you could go out in public and you'd see people, reading a book or talking to people or having a drink or socializing. I go out in public now and I see people with their earbuds in or their giant noise canceling headsets on from the moment they walk out the door to the moment they get home. Right. And it's sort of like, the big sign that says, "Don't you dare speak to me." Right. I can't possibly bear speaking face to face to a human. It would be against all social norms, and we would all die, and the Earth would stop rotating on its axis, and we'd all spin off.
Yes.
So we don't socialize. We've kind of forgotten how to have that civil conversation. And everybody here knows I'm divorced, right? So one of the things I noticed quickly when I got to the point where I was actually willing to be sort of more in the dating world is of course 2 months after I got divorced, I joined a dating site because I'm like, how the hell do you meet people? Right. And one of the things I noticed was there were on a lot of dating profiles, the first thing was, if you believe the following things, don't contact me. It was all politics. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So we've gotten so much politics ingrained in our head that it's us against them against us, that we just kind of won't even bother to sit in a room with people who don't vote the same way we do anymore.
Yeah, and it used to be considered rude. Like if you brought up politics or religion or something like that when you were at a party or you were out at a bar, it's like you were the asshole. Right?
Yeah.
You're just not supposed to do that. This is not the time. We're all having a nice time together, and we're going to just not think about the fact that we will not even remotely, vote for the same person.
Yeah.
Like it was just not done.
Yeah, I've had people come to me, and not online. I've had people come to me like, hey, when I used to live in the high rise, there were some younger women that lived there that apparently looked at me like their safe older brother, which I felt kind of offensive. I'm like, how am I the safe one? Can't I be a little bit dangerous? But apparently I'm not, right? So I was everybody's safe older brother. And one of them came to me and said, this guy asked me to marry him, but I don't know how he votes. Should I ask? I'm like, the fuck difference does it make? Who cares if you're actually thinking of building a life together? Does how he votes actually matter to you? But that's the sort of stuff that goes on.
Yeah.
Is we now make life decisions based on how we vote, and I can't grasp how we got to this point. I don't know how the hell we're going to fix it, but it is what it is.
Well, the hope would be that I don't know about the both of you, but the best things I've learned in my life have come from my most awful mistakes. So
Right.
I always see a bit of hope when we, like, even at this point where it's like, wow, there's a lot of things that just seem to be going wrong, but I'm hoping, and I think you see it sometimes reflected in people that they kind of figure out, like, oh, let's not do it this way anymore. Let's try something different. We know this doesn't work. Let's not screw it up that way again. So my hope would be that, even though we hit a low here, that it bounces out, that we kind of learn a lesson about some of these things. And I think it's good, like us talking about things today and other people talking about it is good, to kind of say, well, what could we get out of it, as opposed to, at this moment, like I said, we don't have data. So the other stuff, like, is it the deep state or was it Trump's team faking? It's like, well, I have no idea, right? At this
Or
point.
just some random crazy person, right?
Right. Yep.
Somebody who just wants to be famous.
I'm going to go with random crazy person. Hang on one second. I've got more stuff coming.
Yep. The odds, that to me would be like, you have, there's very divided politics these days. There's 360 million people in the U.S.
It depends on who you ask.
Yeah, and you need one crazy person. So,
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like,
I would bet very good money on crazy person, right?
Yeah.
Deep state, whatever you want to call it. First off, okay, let me clear this up right now. So I was U.S. Army, right? So I was cross-trained as light infantry. I went to and successfully graduated from the U.S. Army Sniper School. To this day, I can hit with open sights with my M1 Garand or my Mosin Nagant, which are antiques. They're both older than I am. I can bullseye something the size of a grapefruit at 300 to 350 yards as long as I have my glasses on. Without my glasses, I can't do it. With a scope, I could hit much better, much further than that. If this was the deep state, they wouldn't have missed.
Yeah. No, I do. I was, I shoot pool at the VFW, the Veterans of Foreign Wars. So I'm constantly around people who could do that. And yeah, if it was one of our high class people doing it, they could have easily taken somebody out from those trees.
Yeah, wouldn't have missed.
I just.
And the Secret Service probably wouldn't have him in custody already, right? They would have probably taken a little while to do it.
Mhm.
My vote, my guess is, wildly crazy person. The only thing I have in here, and I know the Secret Service probably had him under control, had the person doing the shooting under control very quickly. Or, let's go. Let me see if I can find the video. It took Secret Service a while to get him in the car. And the thing, when I blinked out for a second, when I muted for a second, the thing somebody was calling me about was that it took them too long to get him in the car. So that means the guy was under control, right? So if they didn't have the shooter under control right here, so I'm going to hit mute here. So, Secret Service is surrounding him, turning him into a human shield. They got the shortest agent in front, which is stupid. But if you didn't have the shooter under control, his feet wouldn't touch the ground until he's in the car.
Yeah.
Right? The agents are not going to stand there being human meat shields while there's an active shooter in the area, unless they know they've got that shooter down or under control in some fashion. Right. So, this being deep state, I don't buy off on that. This being random crazy person, I've met enough crazy people. I believe it.
Yeah, we've got plenty of crazy people in the United States. I think we prove that on a daily basis these days.
Oh yeah, I think we can safely claim we have beaten Canada on the crazy people side.
Oh, you've never visited, have you?
I have. Wait, does Niagara Falls count?
we used to say there's a fight in the parking lot and a hockey game broke out.
Right?
No, but I will tell you this. When I was still at MIT, I had a chance to go to a Red Sox Yankee game with myself, another physics professor, a retired Bruin, and a guy who owned an underground construction company. They did utility construction. I will let you take a guess at who almost started the fight, and it wasn't the physics people. At a baseball game, the former hockey player just about started the fight because it's Red Sox Yankee. It's Red Sox Yankee is like a religion in the Northeast, and it's kind of like a hockey game in a lot of ways. So yeah, it's unique. Yeah, I will tell you that the physics professors cursed more than the hockey player though.
Yeah, and there's you'd appreciate the math to the peacefulness of Canadians. Fewer teeth leads to fewer arguments.
Since we've gotten completely off topic here, I was when I still lived in my other place. My daughter was a couple years younger than she is now, and she was playing ice hockey. So when somebody pointed out, I'm like, well, gee, she plays ice hockey. The kid's pretty big. She doesn't mind punching her older brothers and keeping them under control. I have no trouble when she goes to date. And people are like, no, it's not the one she doesn't like you have to worry about. I was like, you bastard. First time, that's just mean. But a former NFL player came by who I do some work with, and said something to her, and the subject of football came up, and she didn't know who he was, and she goes, "Oh, football players, they're not the toughest contact sport players out there. They're not even close." And I was like, "Aaron," I was trying to keep her quiet, and he's like, no, let her continue. He goes, "Justify it." He goes, "Hockey players are." She goes, "Look, you guys, football players like stub a toe, they pull a pinky, they're out for 3 weeks. Hockey players get hit in the face with a puck, they go right back in."
Right? They're trying to hide the blood so they don't throw him out of the game.
Kid's got a point.
You're already cold. So
she had a good point, right? She had it down. And the football player's like, she's right. So she's an interesting one. But yeah, so anyway, go ahead, Richard. I think you were going to say something there.
I was actually just going to ask just you, Janice, in your circles of, say, people who study sociology and things like that, has there what conversations have you all been having in the past few years? Because it have the politics and things like lately impacted what you discuss?
Well, yeah, especially for me because I actually jumped fields when I got my master's because I originally came to college to become a sex therapist.
Mhm.
The late Dr. Ruth, who we just lost today,
Oh, I left her.
was my hero, and yeah, and that's what I. But the field of the when I was going to jump to be to do my master's for psych, they were not letting me differentiate between male and female patients for sex therapy, including having actual physical difficulties. I wasn't allowed to do that. And so I started to look for what it was that was causing psych not to care about biology anymore, and found it. So not exactly the most popular sociologist right now, because they're on the deep end. I mean, the people that are studying with me are not interested in biology. A lot of them don't even know just the basics about it. So, or a lot about history. Even it's much more about what's going on, just what's popular, as opposed to what actually, causes us to, act like we're a species of primates. It's very upsetting whenever I point that out. So they're not really interested in this kind of thing for large part.
So look at this. A first aid doctor was assisting another victim who was hit in the shooting. So somebody was hit besides Trump. So apparently, when they missed, it went someplace, which tends to happen with bullets. When you miss, they don't just stop right where you thought they were going to go.
Yeah.
There's a couple of fake reports that I can't confirm. When you guys were talking, I looked. There were a couple of people saying, "Oh, they identified the shooter. It was this guy, and he's a known this person." And I've looked, and there has been no official announcement of the shooter yet. So, already people are trying to throw out names like, "Oh, look, it was this kind of person, that kind of person," and it's who the hell knows. But the Secret Service, the Secret Service obviously already has them, and the Secret Service and police are going to come out and make a formal statement. It's not going to break on some news website without a press conference on this one. There will be an official stop the presses moment for that one. But anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt there, but yeah, there were other people hit when they were with the missed shot.
Oof.
And looks like it was hurt worse than the candidate was. So
yeah, I saw one of the behind him. There was much more blood that would have come from him on one of the chairs, and that may be the person that got shot behind him.
So John, I've seen people saying he was identified by Butler PD. I saw that, but I can't find it. All I see are tweets saying it, and I've learned over the years to not trust a tweet.
Yeah.
So the news is saying that the shooter is dead, as well as someone else. John, you may be exactly right. It may be that, but I couldn't find it in a quick Google search. All I found were a bunch of tweets about it. So, what you're saying is right. There's people claiming it was a Antifa member. Said he posted a video. So hopefully that'll come out on the news before too long. Antifa is, of course, the anti-fascist group who are the opposition to Donald Trump. They're opposition to all things right-wing. They're a far-left group that has decided that you need to take it back by any means necessary. And they love to do things like say, the ends justify the means, which is absolute bullshit, right? That's never the case. So.
Right. They just took somebody else's name because they're nothing like Antifa.
Anti-fascist accent, right? So I get we all agree that fascists are bad because fascists were Nazis, but you don't say fascists are bad and Nazis are bad and then use Nazi tactics. That's not the way it goes. Yeah. So somebody did say shoot her down. So yeah, I agree. John, I believe just watching that video that the shooter was down before Trump got back up from behind that podium, because as somebody who has worked in military units and around them for years after that, when I was still in the defense and aerospace sector, if you're the meat shield, you don't let him stand still, and you certainly don't put yourself there like that and be relatively calm, which they were, if that shooter wasn't already down. So they had the shooter under control, or the Secret Service wouldn't have been fairly calm in the process. At least if I were Secret Service, my ass wouldn't have been. I've been like, we're getting your ass in that truck.
Well, everybody else was calm too.
Yeah.
Like normally you would have expected the audience to just start, running away from the shooter, and they didn't. They were all just like sitting around like they were just watching a regular show. It was strange.
It is weird. There was no stampede.
Yeah. So there's some people on Twitter now saying maybe it was Miliana just because she didn't want to go back to the White House. Okay, I find that one kind of funny. I'll give people credit for that one. And I believe she don't want to go back to the White House. But it is what it is. So, all right, no more news is going to break. I don't know that I really want to keep doing a live stream when there's nothing new to talk about. But thank you guys for coming by. Everybody, thanks for kind of tuning in off and on. I agree that you all are nitwits. Apparently they do have the shooter. I do like your handle, by the way. That's pretty cool. It's certainly better than anybody who follows me knows I'm into Dungeons and Dragons, and Richard here has worked for Wizards of the Coast, who owns Dungeons and Dragons. And tomorrow I'm kicking off a new campaign with my kids, and I have to show what my son named his character if I can find it. It was one of the best character. Oh, there it is. It was one of the best character names my 13-year-old ever came up with. Swagmasters.
696969.
Truly, only a 13-year-old boy could come up with that one, and then showed it to me giggling. So
I'm
Nice.
glad to know the tradition. I think my first character was named MacGyver, like MacGyver Elf. I think that's what it called.
Gosh, I don't even remember, because I was playing back in the early 70s when they were still building it up, because Dad had started getting into it because they wanted to use it for all the super dweebs who were not good at huming at peopling really at all. And so D&D was a good way to get them to be able to work together with people who were very different from each other. And so, it's always funny to me to see that this thing that was always a super dweeb, not cool thing that I did in my young life is now just everybody thinks is the coolest thing ever.
Well, you go back further than me. I'm sort of like 80s. That's when I picked it up.
I am, and I still have it. I am that vintage.
I think that's what I started with too.
Yeah, the one that still had 3 hole punches in it. So it. I would say that I'm old, but it's better than the alternative. So I'm not that old. But it's we're kicking off a game tomorrow. By the way, Richard, we're doing. Into the Keep on the Borderlands. They actually agreed to do the earlier edition instead of 5th edition. So we're going to do Keep on the Borderlands.
Cool.
The OG.
Nice.
Basically because, I wanted everybody to start with level 1 characters and build up instead of starting at super high elevated stuff for beginner players.
Well, let them have some fun in Fantasyland and don't let them into this politics stuff for a while.
Oldest one is 14. They're not going to. The oldest one's 14, and he does. So I'll wrap my son up because he's not within earshot. So I took the kids to dinner at this local place the other night called, down in Addison, called the Magic Time Machine. which has all these different sort of themed places where you can sit. Like you sit in a school bus, you sit in a time capsule, you sit in a space capsule. All the waiters wear costumes and everything. And halfway through dinner, my 14-year-old was asking me questions, and he's like, "How do you talk to girls?" I'm like, "Well, they're just people. You just talk to them." So my 11-year-old sat there for 15 minutes explaining how you actually talk to a girl, to her 14-year-old brother. And I'm sitting there like, I should take notes. She's actually good at this.
It's amazing. Ask a girl and try that.
Yeah. Like, you have a sister. She's right there. Just talk to her.
Right. She likes you. She wants you to get married off someday and all of that. Yeah. Try asking girls that like you for help about that. Great advice. Great advice.
Her motivation was slightly different. Her motivation was, if you had a girlfriend, you'd bother me less.
Yeah. Yeah. Whatever the reason she wants to get you hooked up with one you want to stay with forever, go with that.
And he's going to be a high school freshman next year, so he's kind of in that mode of, how do you do these sort of things? Yeah. And he's getting kind of in that, how does this work kind of thing. And I was like, look, don't just, ask her questions about herself. Try to get her to talk about herself. And my daughter's like rolling her eyes. And I was like, what do you mean? She's like, well, you got to talk about yourself too. You can't just have it be like one way, or she's going to get bored and wander off.
Right. Yeah. Do something cool that makes her think you're interesting. Try that.
Exactly. Find a common thing you can talk about. And I was using this example from when I was in college, because when I went to university, I was out of the Army. I'd been off on my own, and I was 24 when I started college. And some of the 18-year-olds straight out of school, when you're hanging out with the physics majors, you're hanging out with the nerdiest of the nerdy on campus. I don't care whatever campus you're on. The people actually majoring in physics are the nerdiest people on that campus, with the possible exception of the math majors, and we don't talk about them. But the physics guys were always like, hey, wow, you're always talking to women. How do you do that? And I'm like, well, okay, let's go to the bar and, I'll see what it is you're doing when you try to talk to girls and see where you get it wrong. And well, one of them was trying to impress girls with math proofs from calculus. And I'm like, step number 1, no math in a bar. Step 2, which one do you want to talk to? And he points to this one girl. I'm like, okay, pick one that didn't come in with 3 football players, right? That's step 2. So I finally pointed him to one that was playing this is when touchscreens were really big at bars. You could play little touchscreen games. And I was like, there's one that's been over there. There's this nice little woman who I'd seen around campus a couple times, sitting over there drinking Long Island iced teas, playing the touchscreen by herself, looking like somebody should come talk to her soon because she's getting bored. Go there.
Right?
Go there.
There's a chance. She's bored right now. Go.
She's looking for something to do. There's an entry. He's like,
right? She's in the bar, not doing this at home. Think about that.
She's on her 3rd drink, man. Go.
My friend Rob helped me ask a girl out when I was in high school. And his technique was this. He walks up to me. She was at a party. We were both at a party. And he was like, you really like her, don't you? And I was like, yeah, I kind of do. I think she's pretty cool. And he's like, if you don't ask her out, I'm gonna.
Good motivation.
So I did that to one
beer, and he's like, "You got 15 minutes." I was like,
I did that to one of the physics majors. He was like, "Can you go up and start a conversation with that girl for me?" I'm like, "Then she's talking to me, not to you." I'm like, "What do you want me to do? Walk up and go, hey, my friend Rudy over there is too much of a chicken shit to come talk to you. Would you come with me, please?"
Yeah.
Right.
How's that going to work?
Right. She's going to say no.
Exactly. So yeah, I just look at it like, we have kind of these challenges in this world, and back to what we were saying earlier, and that was sort of late 90s, early 2000s, and that was sort of the last time when people could actually sit and talk to each other about stuff, and now those days are kind of completely gone, right? Now it's just like, who can we insult faster than the other? But anyway. All right. Well, since there's no more news, no new announcements, I'm going to say we'll just kind of call it a night. But thank you guys for coming in on this impromptu live stream. I did not anticipate. I did not have presidential candidate has shots fired at him on my 2024 bingo card. So now that's 2 this year.
It's nice meeting you, Janice.
Nice meeting you too. Perhaps we'll talk about D&D sometime and a little
but by the way,
less
Janice,
traumatic kind of start.
so
That
Janice,
would be incredible.
just so you know who Richard is, he was a former art director at Wizards of the Coast on both Dungeons and Dragons and on Magic the Gathering. So he has his artwork in the Player's Handbook. And Richard, correct me if I'm wrong. One of the vampire one, Rick Tovin.
Curse of Strahd.
Curse
Yeah,
of Strahd.
I'm in a bunch of them. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
I'm
well
not
then
the
he would
best
probably
artist, though.
like my old school stuff that Dad got from Gygax and the other artists back then.
Send me
I'm a giant old school art nerd.
send me a picture of it. I'll forward it on to him.
Okay.
But anyway, all right. Thank you guys for coming by. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Sorry I didn't have any new breaking news. I just wanted to kind of get on and say, hey, look, we need to get back to a world where we can actually sit in a room and disagree with each other, and we're okay with that. Shooting at people doesn't solve any problems. But anyway, all right, everybody, have a great night.
Have a good night.
Night.